Hey everyone. Uh, Today I want to talk about one of Lucio Fulci's earlier pieces that I know most horror fans are familiar with: Zombie, House by the Cemetery, um, City of the Living Dead, or The Gates of Hell. Um, and those are great pieces, but um, I had a copy of Don't Torture a Duckling for quite some time from 1972, and hadn't really given it much attention. And so I decided to sit down and give it a spin for the first time in a really long time. And I was really impressed with the film. I liked it a lot more than New York Ripper for several reasons. New York Ripper was okay. That movie had a much more sleazy feel to it. Don't Torture Duckling is a very mean-spirited film, and I hadn't really remembered just how mean-spirited that film was until I watched it again. Anytime that you have a film that centers around the murder of young children or young boys, in particular, or young girls, it doesn't matter. The murder of young children is kind of a touchy subject, and I would be willing to bet that he received quite a bit of flack for making this film, especially back in 1972 in Italy, where he really touched on some themes that I'm sure the majority of Italians, being a very Catholic country, would not appreciate. I'm just going to warn you now that there may be some spoilers in this review. I'm going to keep it pretty quick in case a lot of you haven't seen it. And I really hesitate to give away any of the ending or any elements of it because it truly is a mystery. Now, as opposed to a straight horror film, this is definitely a Giallo film, which is more of a crime mystery genre of film that came out of Italy. Once again, this is a very mean-spirited film. The one thing that I found was really interesting is there were no redeemable characters in this movie, it seems like, whatsoever. It takes place in a small remote village up in what appears to be kind of like the Italian Alps area. And the town is just filled with despicable people. And so you actually really have no idea who the killer is, because it could be so many people, but they keep finding these young boys murdered in various ways, and some other very random acts of very brutal violence in this film. It's almost like he was in a bad mood when he made this movie and just wanted to take his aggression out on his actors, which wouldn't surprise me actually from things that I've heard. But if you haven't seen it, go ahead and turn this off now so that I don't potentially give away any plot twists or elements. But it is the full-length feature is available if you go to my full-length horror section and scroll down quite a ways down. And then those of you who are still watching have probably already seen it. I have to tell you that it has one of my favorite killer kills of all time, where the priest is being battled up on top, right on the edge of the cliff, right before killing a young girl or throwing her over the edge of a cliff. And as the fight ensues, the priest eventually loses footing and plummets off the side of the cliff, the priest obviously being the killer, which is why I told you to turn it off if you haven't seen it, because it was actually a fairly decent twist. I didn't see it coming at all. At all. So, and I like it when a movie actually tricks me, because I've seen so many of these damn movies that I can usually see right through any kind of red herrings and what have you, and pretty much figure out who the killer is pretty quickly. But the scene of him tumbling down and kind of his head hitting every rock possible on his way down, with his face being kind of sheared off, and it's just the most abusive death I've ever seen. And you know, the priest being a killer is one of the reasons why I said that I'm sure that he received a lot of flack in his country from this film. There's also another scene that earlier on, about halfway through, or 2/3 of the way through, that really gets to me, and it's the scene of the woman in the kind of courtyard, getting attacked by a group of men, and they're beating her with chains, and it's one of those scenes that I actually kind of had to use my, what I call my gore scope. When I'm watching something in a movie, there's a few types of injuries that can be inflicted, or wounds inflicted in movies, that I just cringe. Paper cuts. Anytime that an Achilles tendon, like the heel, is cut, like in Pet Cemetery, brutally painful to watch. I can't handle it. And in Hostel, that scene was just awful. But I use my gore scope, and for some reason I can handle seeing a scene a lot better if I look at it through my little gore scope. It gives me just enough distraction to not completely wince and writhe in discomfort. But the scene in the where they're beating her with chains and stuff, for some reason, just really got to me. I know he's never been one to shy away from graphic violence, and movies like Zombie, of course, which has one of my all-time favorite effects, and I think most of you would agree with me, the splinter in the eye scene. That I can handle for some reason. That's no problem. But sometimes seeing people, especially one character hits her with a board right here, and it looks like it gives her a compound fracture, and she's kind of reaching up, her hand shaking as she touches it, and that I knew I had to look through my goroscope at that at that point. But this is definitely not a slasher. It's definitely a mystery thriller, but one that absolutely should be in your collection. And if it's not, at least give it a spin. Like I said, the link to somebody who has it is full length here on YouTube, and it's a very, very clear. Actually, it loaded with no problem for me, and there was no dragging or anything, or buffering problems throughout the film. In fact, I could advance through it and behind it and back and forth with no problem, unlike some of the other uploads on there. But give it a watch if you haven't seen it, and if you have seen it and you haven't seen it in a while, just look at it with a new eye. Look at it through the eyes of an Italian person back in 1972 seeing this movie. I'm pretty sure that he was reviled by quite a few people. I know his reputation in Italy wasn't all that great. He made a lot of, and I think this was actually considered his most controversial film, and I think he considered it his most controversial film, which it undoubtedly is. Just the two elements of killing small boys, and then having a Catholic priest as the one who was dispatching these young boys for their sexual sins that are laughably non-existent at this point, but he wanted to save them from their sins and absolve them at the point of death so that they could receive the kingdom of heaven. I mean, really have to wonder what Lucio Fulci's religious feelings were. I've got a feeling that he had some issues. Probably went to Catholic school, probably got spanked by a nun, or beat by a priest, or who knows what, because he really has some vitriol that comes across, and not just in this film, but in many of his films. There's just some very anti-Catholic content, which I always find quite amusing. I like it when sacred cows are kind of put in their place. It makes me smile. But give it a spin, and feel free to share your comments on this movie with the comments down below. Let me know how you felt about it. And I have to say that I believe it's the Anchor Bay version. I think there's also one by Blue Underground. Um, and I believe that both of them are equally like the same cut. I could be wrong. I have the Anchor Bay release. But yeah, feel free to share your feelings on this film. I'd love to hear your opinions as well. Thanks a lot.